Okay, it just told me recording in progress, so we are good to go. So I just want to welcome you to the Norfolk Library and our post-pandemic life, how to move forward presentation. My name is Kandra Hughes. I have a PhD in psychology from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And I would say that mental health and well-being are passion projects of mine. It's something that I do a lot of personal reading about. I've done some research. It's just something that I think is so important in order for us to thrive and be the best versions of ourselves. And so when we were talking about online programming for what we're going to do next, I thought, well, let's do something about post-pandemic life and how we can move forward. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. And I think you all should be able to see that. Lynn, since I can see you, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see? Okay, great. So I have been working here at the Norfolk Library since September of 2019, which means that for most of my time here, I have been working during a pandemic. And we all know what 2020 has been. I mean, I think 1 star is being generous. It is very bad. We would not recommend 2020 to anyone. And I say that, and the list of negative aspects to 2020 pretty much goes from here to the moon and back. But there have been some positive experiences that I'm sure we have all experienced, for lack of a better word. And one of them is just, for me, working at the library during a pandemic, it allowed us to really look at our online programming and see what we could offer that would be meaningful to people. And then there are also just other experiences that we've had. So when the pandemic started and we really had no idea what was going on, and we were trying to figure out ways to fill our time, we started focusing on what I'll call mental health activities. And so SurveyMonkey reached out to 600 people living in the United States, and they asked, how have you been spending your time in the pandemic? And so this is a word infographic that basically describes a lot of the responses. And so you'll see some very valuable activities that people were participating in, things like exercising, listening to music, reading, spending time outdoors. I mean, truly just wonderful activities. And then the pandemic was also an opportunity for us to do good deeds for other people. So these same 600 people were asked the question, what good deeds are you doing during the coronavirus crisis? And so it's things like we're supporting local restaurants, we're reaching out to people who lived alone, we're teaching others to use video conferencing technology. I mean, do you remember before times when none of us had really used Zoom? And now look at all of us. It's a Thursday at 5:30 and we're Zooming together probably for, the 20th to 100th time for a lot of us. So we were doing things that theoretically could help establish or help promote well-being in our lives, and we're doing good deeds. The problem is that 15 months is a long time for us to be in this pandemic. And so the way our beautiful brains work is there are all these connections and these neural pathways. And so everything, all of these external stimuli that our eyes are watching, our ears are hearing, our nose is smelling, our mouth is tasting, all of this stimuli gets sent to our brain, and the neural pathways, they start firing, they start releasing chemicals called neurotransmitters, hormones, and that's going to impact how we feel. And so how we feel impacts how we think about how we feel. So you see that it's this cycle. And so, yeah, we were doing these activities that promoted mental health and well-being and physical health, and some of us were cultivating our spiritual relationships. But when we're being assaulted by this COVID-19 stimuli, and it's hard to get away from it, even if you're not going on the news, there was just a lot of fear and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of misinformation, and some of it was intentional misinformation. And if that's not going to do a number on the way your brain is firing from neuron to neuron, then I don't know what else is going to have that kind of effect. And so also as our neurons are firing, different areas of our brain are activated. And I suspect for a lot of us in the early stages of the pandemic, the amygdala, which is where fear is located in the brain, like our amygdalas were probably lit up nonstop. And that is a hard way to live for months on end. And now going on, what, 15 months? It is a long time. You know, a lot of times people talk about how our body digests food and we talk about clean eating and all that. But let's not forget that our brain is digesting everything in our environment. It's one of the reasons that I shy away from consuming violent media, because I understand how my brain is going to digest that and how that's going to affect my feelings, which are then going to affect my thoughts. And so as we're going through these 15 months, I know I started feeling some changes inside me. And you might have started feeling this too. We just didn't feel quite like ourselves anymore. So I want you to look at this list. And we sort of started feeling empty, or, you know, we're living through it, but we're not really enjoying things anymore. Some of us were having difficulty concentrating. I know for me personally, I was doing a lot of doom scrolling, which if you're not familiar with that term, that's where you're constantly looking through your social media feed for the next piece of bad news, because then it's going to be novel to your brain. And even though it's going to feel really bad, it's a feeling. And sometimes our brains just crave any sort of emotional connection, good and bad. And so we were getting something out of that doom scrolling, but at what expense? And so we all started feeling these emotions and having these issues and expressing them to one another. And it was when I read this essay by a journalist in the New York Times, his name is Adam Grant, he put a name on it. And he said, this is called languishing. And it's the name for this blah that we've been feeling. And what I loved in the article, he called languishing the neglected middle child of mental health. And it's somewhere in between depression, which is the lower end, and flourishing. So flourishing is that, you know, you're living your absolute best. I mean, it's basically this absence of well-being. And it's going to dull our lives. It's going to minimize our motivation. And it may, in fact, the claim he was making in the article is that it may be the dominant emotion for a lot of us in 2021. And when I saw that, and I heard that word languishing, which I had not heard in this context before, I thought, yes, that is something I can relate to. And so when we were talking about additional programming for the library going into the summer, I said, I think I want to talk about this. And the library has been so supportive in letting me go on these ventures. And so I think because you're here, that means you're interested in going on this adventure with me to find out more about languishing and what we can do about it. And so then the question is, well, you know, is there anything really wrong with languishing based on the fact that, well, we're living in a pandemic, we've been living in a pandemic, shouldn't we be feeling this way? And actually, yes. Like in the short term, nothing is wrong with languishing. Because yeah, this has been a really tough 15 months for a lot of us. For all of those reasons I named before, the fear, the uncertainty, the misinformation, the purposeful misinformation. I mean, we should be having some sort of a response to it. So in the short term, that's okay. And it's great that we're actually calling it languishing, because now we know. We can say, well, this is how I'm feeling. I am languishing. Because it's like when you're walking down the street and someone says, how are you doing? And the automatic response is fine. Most of us just say that as another form of saying like, hey, hello, how are you? But, you know, we're really not fine. And so in the article, they were saying, well, now you can actually say like, you know, I'm languishing. Like I've been better before, you know, it's not the worst I've ever been. And I also think that it's important that we know to call it this term languishing and to actually feel what we're feeling. So that's the psychologist in me coming out. Is there can be, especially in the United States, where we don't like to show emotions, we can be incredibly judgmental to people who share their emotions. We will suppress them. And what happens if we suppress our emotions or our feelings is that they will come back tenfold, 100-fold. they get very angry at being suppressed. And this is what we call ironic processing theory. And the very best example of this, that I did not come up with this is standard in the study of psychology, is I want you to not think about a white bear. And so just by me asking you not to think about a white bear, you're going to have a very hard time getting that white bear out of your head. And so it is the same with your feelings. If you do not allow yourself to feel the stagnation, to feel the loss of anticipation, to feel the doom, if you don't actually allow yourself to feel those feelings, they are going to come back with a lot of force. And so that can be a problem in the long term. Is that languishing, it can predict poor mental health outcomes in the future. It can have significant impact on your life, not necessarily in the short term, but in the long term. And here's the biggest problem with languishing is because it's happening to us over this long extended period of time. And I really hate this analogy because I don't like to think of what's happening to the frog, but it's, you know, the idea of how do you boil a frog? Well, you just gently turn up the temperature until all of a sudden the water is boiling and the frog had no idea what happened. And that's what languishing can be. All of a sudden, you know, you're just starting to feel stuck. Okay, it's now lasting a month. It's now lasting 2 months. All of a sudden, you're not going out as much anymore. You're not connecting with people. The things and the activities that brought you joy before are no longer bringing you that sense of joy. And it can be really hard to notice in the short term. And so some of you might be wondering now, based on what I'm saying, like, well, am I languishing? I mean, maybe I don't know, like maybe I am, maybe I'm not. And so of course there is an inventory because this is psychology and we love to measure things. That's the social scientist in us. So if you do want to grab your pencil or pen and your paper, here are a series of valid and reliable questions for determining where you are on the languishing to flourishing spectrum. Now, here's what I want you to do. I actually want you to, so let me actually just show this first question. So on a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being the most positive, I want you to rate how satisfied are you with life as a whole. Okay, so 0, you're not satisfied at all. 10, you're incredibly satisfied. And what I want you to do is I want you to have 3 columns, one for right now. This is how I'm doing right now. I then want you to do a thought experiment and remember one of the worst times in your life, okay? And I want you to answer the question, how satisfied are you with life as a whole, as if you were that person back then at one of the worst times in your life. I also want you to imagine one of the best times in your life if you were answering that question then. So 3 columns, right now, imagining yourself at one of the worst times in your life, and then imagining yourself as one of the best times in your life. So we're going to have a series of these 10 questions, and this is the first one. How satisfied are you with life as a whole? Now our second question, and it's the same scale, 0 to 10 throughout, is how happy do you usually feel? And so right now, worst time, best time. In general, how would you rate your physical health? So take a moment and jot that down for your 3 columns. And then how would you rate your overall mental health? Overall, to what extent do you feel the things you do in your life are worthwhile?
Hey, Kelly, can you slow down a little bit?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sorry. Do I need to go back?
What was the last one?
What was the last one?
How would you rate your overall mental health?
Yeah, I'm still on number 2, but.
Oh, okay. I apologize. And I thank you to whoever came on and asked me to go slower. So I'm just going to start from the beginning again. I hope that's not going to be too confusing, but I'll say their numbers now. Okay, so number 1, how satisfied are you with life as a whole? So, yeah. Okay, so number 2 is how happy do you usually feel? Whoops. 3. In general, how would you rate your physical health? I'm counting to 10 and it seems really long in my head, so hopefully we're doing okay. How would you rate your overall mental health? Overall, to what extent do you feel the things you do in your life are worthwhile? I understand my purpose in life. And so if I'm again going too fast, please just let me know. I want everyone to get as much as they can out of these questions and this presentation. I always act to promote good in all circumstances, even in difficult and challenging situations. I am always able to give up some happiness now for greater happiness later.
Need a little bit of time for this one.
Sure. Thank you for whoever said that, because it's not easy jumping into a Zoom presentation. So I really appreciate that. Whoops. All right, I'm going to move forward. I am content with my friendships and relationships. And then we have one more after this one. And the last one. My relationships are as satisfying as I would like them to be. So I'll just give you a little bit of time. If you want to finish writing your numbers for these and then add them up. Now would be an excellent time to do that. Yeah, so I do just want to say we are recording this and I will be sending the link out to everyone. So if you do have to leave early, don't worry, you're going to get a copy of my slides and you're going to get a copy of the recording. Okay, so one of the reasons that I asked you to think about your worst time, think about your best time, and think about now is because when we study longitudinal data, we always say you need at least 3 time points to establish a trend. So I'm always a big believer in measuring more, because once you have more measurements, you can always reduce it if you want. But it also gives you a good indication of where you are now. So if we have 10 items and the lowest score is 0, that means if you're at a 0, well, you're thoroughly depressed. And I would encourage you after this presentation to seek medical treatment or psychological treatment. And then 100 is going to be flourishing. Like you are at the top of, you're at the top, like there's nowhere else to go. And so basically what we're
If you're
looking,
100, you should probably also seek medical attention.
well, or, you know, maybe you're the Dalai Lama. That's not to say the Dalai Lama shouldn't seek medical attention, but okay. So basically, when we look at languishing, flourishing, we're basically measuring these different aspects of our life, like life satisfaction, happiness, different forms of health, our purpose in life, delayed gratification, gratitude, relationships. And the reason I had you do 3 is just it gives you a better idea of where you are right now. And I came up with the idea of asking you to do this because right now I'm at a 76 and I was like, oh, you know, that actually sounds pretty good, but I do still feel kind of stuck and languishing a bit, but I have made significant improvements. And so that's when I thought, well, okay, how do I compare from when I was like my absolute happiest or when I thought I was flourishing the most in my life? And I gave myself, when I went through these questions, I gave myself an 83.5. So not that different from where I am right now. And that actually makes a lot of sense to me because with the advent of spring and the longer days and the flowers blooming and the restrictions lifting, I have noticed a real sense of change in my physical, emotional, and spiritual health. But then I thought, well, wait a minute. Okay, well, how does this compare to like a year ago when I was undergoing a lot of stress specifically related to the pandemic? And so a year ago, I was at 51, which that's a huge change from the most flourishing I've ever been to where I was 1 year ago. So that was also meaningful information from me. And it let me know that, yeah, I feel like I've been feeling better. And when I measure it, yes, that is an indicator to me. And then at my worst time in my life, I was actually a 17. And I was a little embarrassed to have to admit this to all of you, but I was really miserable. I was a tenured associate professor of psychology. I mean, that is a dream job for a lot of people. But for me, I suffered a lot of burnout. I was in this career that I really didn't feel any passion for. I felt like my life had been going in the wrong direction for years and I wasn't sure what to do about it. And I would call that my personal rock bottom. I mean, 17 is not good. And that's when I really started to wake up to life. And I don't know if it's because I have a background in psychology that I knew there had to be a better way. But that's when I personally started becoming an advocate for studying mental health and well-being and sharing these tools with as many people who are willing to listen, because I have personally seen it improve my life. And I also just want to be clear that there is no better expert for your well-being than you. I mean, I'm assuming we've all been on the internet just scrolling around, looking at stuff, and there are a lot of people that like to give advice. And here I am giving you advice. Well, my advice isn't going to necessarily work for you, maybe little bits and pieces. And that's okay with me. If you take away just one usable tool from this presentation, or if this presentation benefits you in even just the smallest of ways, I think that's going to be awesome. So I am a big advocate of never let anyone tell you that this is the best way to do something for you, because no one is a better expert than you. You know you. I also just want to take a moment to recognize that to be able to ask these questions of ourselves does come from a place of privilege. So I'm not sure how familiar anyone in the audience is with Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Abraham Maslow was a developmental psychologist. And basically these questions that we're asking ourselves, allowing us to determine why we're not actually living our best lives right now, we are at the top of the pyramid. We're at the love and belonging esteem, and we're trying to get to the self-actualization. And that is a product of our privilege and our circumstances. And if we are here down at the bottom, just trying to figure out where our next meal is going to come from, where we're going to sleep at night, or how we're going to pay our electricity bill, You do not have the luxury to spend time thinking, why am I not flourishing? So I also think it's important when we have these conversations to recognize that not everyone has this ability or this luxury to be able to have these conversations with themselves. Okay, so the question is, how are we going to move forward? And again, I just want to stress that these techniques are descriptive. They're not prescriptive. And I have included a bunch for us that I think there's going to be at least one thing for everyone. And again, I'm not prescribing them. I'm just going to describe them. And as I do, I want you to think about you, what you know about yourself, the expert you, and how this might benefit your life, because some of them you'll be able to immediately scrap. And some of them are going to ring so true that your heart is going to get excited just imagining you being able to start these techniques. And some of them you're not going to know about. And I would also like you to think of approaching these with a spirit of experimentation. If they don't work for you, let me tell you, you are not a failure. You are awesome for just trying. And it's really useful and validated to know that X, Y, or Z doesn't work for you. And again, you can just, kick all of those experts on the internet right in their behinds and be like, this might work for you. This does not work for me. So on that note, we're going to get started with just check in with yourself. Ask yourself some questions. Maybe you're a writer and you want to journal about it. Ask someone else questions about yourself. However, if you do this, you have to come into the conversation with a spirit of listening. You cannot be a yeah, butter, which is somebody will say something to you and you're like, yeah, but this. And then they'll say something else and you'll be like, yeah, but that. This is about getting some honest feedback. And so if you are actually wanting that feedback from someone, you have to hear it regardless of what it is. And you probably should not speak at all in that conversation. Just listen. And you can also talk to a friend and talk to a therapist. Now, I've created a bunch of slides for techniques, but because we are at the Norfolk Library, I have a resource for you for every single one of these techniques. So whichever one or more speaks to you, there is a book that you can read about it. And so for just checking in with yourself, having a discussion with yourself, I'm going to recommend Dan Harris's 10% Happier. He is a television journalist who had panic attacks on national television. And let's see. Okay, so what I liked about this book is that he really is a skeptic about prioritizing well-being. He was not a believer. And he couldn't even look at his own life and figure out what was wrong. And it wasn't until he went to see a doctor and the doctor asked him, well, have you been using, drugs or alcohol lately as a coping mechanism? And he said in the book that he was a little sheepish about this because he admitted, well, yeah, I've been using cocaine to get by. And the doctor's like, you need to stop that immediately, and recommended a bunch of well-being techniques to use instead of cocaine. But you see Dan Harris go through this really great mind shift of being the complete skeptic to understanding that, well, this isn't going to solve my life. But, and this is how he started quantifying it, because people kept asking him, well, how is changing your life this way? How is it helping you? And he finally got them to accept that if he could just say, well, I'm 10% happier, then people were able to accept that, because we like numbers. We're an objective society. Okay, so up next is to move forward out of the languishing and start flourishing again is to practice savoring. So savoring is a psychological technique where we attempt to fully feel, enjoy, and extend our experiences. So I want you to really listen to my voice and look at me and look at how my hands are moving. And you can't smell the wonderful old books in the rare book room, but it's something like that. It's like how when I was walking to the library every day in May up on Grand Street, I was walking by this beautiful lilac bush. It's now all green leaves, but for 3 weeks in May, it had these extraordinary blooms, and it was so fragrant and delightful that I would make it a point to savor that experience for just 1 minute going to and from work every day. And I would pick a different bunch of lilac blooms to smell, and I would really inhale it and try to remember that moment. And so savoring is really awesome for getting back to those small victories in your life and just the tiny things that bring you joy. Because those tiny moments are the ones that are going to stick with us in the long run. And so if you're thinking, wow, yeah, savoring, I think I want to try this one. So I'm going to recommend, and this book is available through Interlibrary Loan. It's called The Happy Traveler, Unpacking the Secrets of Better Vacations. And so Jamie Kurtz is a happiness researcher. I actually went to college with her. She was one of my closest friends in college, and she is an expert on savoring. She actually literally wrote the chapter on savoring for a positive psychology textbook. And yes, this is specifically savoring as it relates to traveling and vacations. And just as a sidebar, if you're one of those people who loves planning vacations, but then the vacation doesn't quite live up to your expectations, or you feel like it didn't go exactly as you planned and you're left feeling kind of blue about it, I would also recommend this book because she has a lot of wonderful techniques for maximizing happiness on your vacation. But she does speak quite a bit at length, or she does write quite a bit at length about savoring in the context of traveling and vacations, and it's an easy application to other areas of your life. Okay, so we've got practicing gratitude. This can be a daily or weekly ritual. For some of us, we've only maybe been doing it once a year on Thanksgiving. And it's important when you talk about practices in general, and I'm going to say gratitude in particular, you don't want it to be a burden because it's going to negate the benefit of the gratitude. And so there's two different techniques that I'm going to particularly recommend. And I do also suggest that you write down what you're grateful for in these two techniques, because I think the writing gives it more validity. But if the choice is between you wanting to try the gratitude technique and you not doing it at all, but you just doing it mentally, do it mentally. Remember, you're the best expert for you. And so you can just take my advice and be like, no, thanks, I'm just going to do this mentally. Okay, the first is the GLAD technique. And so at the end of the night, you write down 4 things. One thing that you are grateful for, one thing that you learned, one thing that you achieved that day, and one thing that just delighted you that day. And so after a few months of this, or I suspect probably after just 1 month of this, you are going to go from where you are on your languishing scale, you're going to increase by at least a couple of points, because it makes you aware that there are little moments throughout the day. Even in the darkest of times, there are little moments that can help our hearts just be as full as possible. And then there's also the what worked well technique, which is also known as the 3 blessings technique. And this is by Martin Seligman, who I believe is the father of positive psychology. He's Princeton trained. He's at the University of Pennsylvania. A lot of what we know about positive psychology is based on his research, and he is a top-notch scientist and researcher. So he really knows his science, and he tests his methods in randomized controlled clinical studies. And so with the what worked well technique is at the end of every night, you think of 3 things that worked well today, but then you also say, because why? And so when I was doing my what worked well technique last night, one of my items was what worked well was my harmonica class. So the library has been offering harmonica and we're on round 2 of it. And our class was last night. And so what worked well was harmonica class because there was a lot of laughter and silliness. We had to sight read a new song and most of us could not get through the first 2 measures of it. And that happened to 4 people in a row. And we were just dying of laughter. And so it was, again, this wonderfully small moment, but it made me realize how great a moment that actually was in the context of my day. And so these techniques just get you more mindful of the little things in your life. And if you like this idea, well, I'm just going to recommend the book Flourish by Martin Seligman. I mean, his writing is excellent. His science is excellent. And what I really like about Dr. Seligman is that when he wrote Authentic Happiness, he said that there were 3 components to happiness. And it was, oh, let me see if I can remember them off the top of my head. It was engagement. It was, oh, wait, I have them written down. Let me see. Okay, so he said it was positive emotion, it was engagement, and it was meaning. And so he published this book, Authentic Happiness, and then he was thinking about it more and doing more research, and he was like, you know what? I was wrong, because what I didn't take into account was having positive relationships and whether your life has purpose or meaning. And so he reformulated the way he approached happiness. And I just love that as a scientist, that he was looking to refine his theory and admitted that he was wrong. So if you're into the gratitude practices and you thought, yeah, I think I'd like to try that as a way to jumpstart my flourishing, then I would say, can't find a better book than Flourish. Maybe you're the type of person that likes to do nice things for other people, in which case I would encourage you to intentionally perform acts of kindness. They can be random, they can be scheduled, both have positive benefits, they can be big or small. And research has shown that if you make it a point to do all 5 acts of kindness in the same day, so they said 5, do them all in the same day, then you see almost an immediate jump in how you feel in terms of your well-being, because there's something about doing them all in the same day. And so, you know, it really does. I mean, you all know you've done kind acts for people, how wonderful it makes you feel. And so if this is something that you haven't necessarily been able to do because of all of the restrictions, you know, now is an excellent time that we're getting out more, but you can also still just call up a friend and tell them how meaningful they've been, or, you know, write them a letter, buy them a little present. And so if this is something that you'd like to learn more about or have a resource for, I recommend the Book of Joy by the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, because you will not find a more joyful book that talks about ideas such as compassion and forgiveness and kindness to one another. I mean, we have these 2 beacons of what it means to be a good person, a contributing person, someone that cares about other people. So if that's what you're searching for, then I highly recommend this book. Of course, connecting with nature. I mean, I suspect a lot of us have heard over the years that there are innumerable positive benefits, both physical, emotional, spiritual health, in just being outside. And it's important to recognize that there are different ways we can actually be outside. We can be active outside. So we can be gardening, we can be walking, we can be running, exercising, you know, we can just be running errands. And if we're doing it in downtown Norfolk, well, hey, we're doing that outside where we're surrounded by the beautiful Berkshire Mountains and the wonderful green and the city meadow. But it's also important to just be passive in nature, which is going to have very different kinds of benefits. And I know that this is a society that does not promote sitting around and doing nothing. But we just have to ignore those voices, those people, because I guarantee you those people do not have your best interest at heart. And I will fully admit, it can be incredibly difficult to just be. It doesn't matter if you're inside or outside, but just to be, that is hard. And so I'm saying if you can just be out in nature for the sole purpose of just being out there, you are also going to see your languishing score. You're going to see some changes on that in the flourishing direction. I recommend the book, The Nature Fix, for that. This is, again, a well-researched, well-thought-out book. And what I loved about this book, and I do want to say, I can't remember if I said this, but I have actually read every single book that I'm recommending. So if one of these resources resonates with you, then feel free to come talk to me about it at the library, because I would love to have more people to talk to about these books. It's just, I really enjoy reading about well-being, and I'm always looking for ways that I can just be more mindful in my own life, because a lot of times I learn things and then I forget them. And so it's always good to be reminded, but also new information presented in a new way can be just as meaningful. And so one of the things I really enjoyed about this book is it validated and reassured me that the time I was spending in nature was actually time being well spent, because I am someone who likes to just be out in nature. Okay, so moving forward to Flourish, you can actually listen to someone. And I mean actively listening, because this is something that I am not that good at, is I listen to respond and share my opinion. And sometimes I don't even wait for that person to finish, because I am so interested in me and sharing my opinion and what I have to say, as if I am more important than what that person is saying. So this is something that I personally know I need to work on. But when you're actively listening, it's things like the don't interrupt, the listening without judgment or jumping to conclusions. This second to last one, it's so hard to do, but unless you are asked, you keep your opinions and solutions to yourself. And that is so hard to do, because you're going to want to share your knowledge. But that is not the point here. We are talking about going from languishing to flourishing, and that real connection with someone by you being an active listener and giving that person your time and your attention. Well, that's, going back to the kindness, like that is just an act of kindness. And then when you do ask follow-up questions, you make sure that they are relevant to the story being told. We, of course, have a book for that called You're Not Listening, What You're Missing and Why It Matters. And I really liked, again, the research in this book. One of the more interesting facts I learned is that the CIA recruits people who are exceptional listeners, because a lot of espionage and spy work really just comes down to being able to listen to what people are saying and get both the actual cues and the underlying message and then parsing it out. So just really interesting information about how we really aren't listening, and how by starting to listen, we can benefit our lives. And on that note, in addition to me suggesting you read this book, in July, the Norfolk Library is going to start hosting a library listeners club. So and it's going to be virtual through Zoom. And so depending on how many people register, everyone gets 3 to 5 minutes to tell a story. We will have themes like travel or holidays, like that. And then we all just listen. And that is the sole purpose, is to give people our attention, and we will listen. And so I'm not sure when exactly that's starting in July, but if I know by the time I send out the recording and slides, I'll put that in the email. Okay, so establish daily routines you find meaningful. This can also help you go from languishing to flourishing. And these routines don't have to be related to your work. They could be for any aspect of your well-being, your emotional health, your physical health, your mental health, your spiritual health. If you want a book for that, I'm going to recommend The Sweet Spot. It has some really simple steps you can take, and I actually credit The Sweet Spot with helping me build an exercise habit. I now exercise about 5 times every week. And I started off exercising just 1 minute a week, and now I am up to 1 hour in the morning, and it's been going on 4 years. And I don't think I would have successfully built that habit if I hadn't used this book, The Sweet Spot. If you want to move forward, you can also try something new, or better yet, you can learn a new skill and then teach it to someone else, because again, you're going to have that connection to them. And it also it creates new firing in the brain. So your brain loves to have that sort of chemical transmission, because those are going to be the good kind of neurotransmitters that we want firing up in the brain. And so I actually recommend anything by Gretchen Rubin. She did this project, a blogging project. She said for 1 year, she was going to try out all of these happiness techniques, and she was going to do research and do her own subjective measures and just see which ones worked and which ones didn't. And I really liked this book, because I liked to see someone in real time trying out these techniques, hearing how she thought they worked, and then just taking little things from this book and putting them into my own life. And, I make my bed every morning because of the Happiness Project. And so again, I can't remember what else I might have taken from this book, but the fact that I can still remember I make my bed because of this. I mean, that shows that it has real impact on my life. I mean, it's like starting the day off with being productive. And I also know someone said, yeah, like immediately when you make your bed, your whole room looks nicer. Okay, so moving forward, we're languishing. We want to flourish. You can just get in the flow. And so flow is when you immerse yourself in work where you lose sense of time, place, and self, which is so hard in 2021 because we are surrounded by technology. And it is so distracting. And it's funny because a lot of times I will also distract myself. There will be times when I'm working at the computer and it's great and I'm doing great. And then I'm like, oh, what does my email say? Why did I do that to myself? Why am I the biggest distraction in my own life? And so it can be really hard to like get in the focus and get in the flow. And so I would recommend this book, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, A Spiritual Path to Higher Creativity, because what Julia recommends is just to get rid of all of the distractions. And she has these wonderful exercises, and I did all of them in the book. She has ideas like writing in a journal. She calls them morning pages. There was one week that was incredibly hard for me where it was don't read anything. And I did that to the best of my ability. And during that week, I did things I've never done before. Like I got a watercolor paint set and brush, and I started to do some watercoloring. I looked up on YouTube, when this was a separate week when I was allowed to read, how to draw cartoon dogs, because that's something I always wanted to do. And so I was able to just try new things, and I'm really happy with some of the changes I made in my life as a result of The Artist's Way. I'm not trying to remember, when I was looking up on YouTube, was I cheating or not? Well, you know what, it doesn't matter. And we're running out of time, so I need to get going. Okay, this one really speaks to me, the breaking up with your smartphone, laptop, iPad, etc. So I have a love-hate relationship with my phone. I understand the benefits of it. And especially in March, April, and May of 2020, I mean, I was on my phone a lot, consuming a lot of social media. I was checking CNN probably 100 times a day because I was like, what is happening now? What's going on with the pandemic? Like, is it the end of the world? Like, or is it not the end of the world? Do they have a vaccine yet? What's going on? And so around the summer of last year, I really made it a point to start limiting my time on this kind of media. And I'm proud to say that I haven't since I think June of 2020 looked on CNN.com once. So I'm really excited by that. But I do indulge in a lot of social media, and I've gotten into TikTok specifically because there is a talking sheepdog that I am just like in love with. And I find this humor to be so up my alley, and it brings a lot of joy into my life. The problem is I don't really ever just look at Casper the Sheepdog's videos. Like I get sucked into the rabbit hole of TikTok. And so on my phone, I have a digital well-being app. And I was looking at my statistics, and I was shocked to see that 2 days in a row, I spent 90 minutes alone just on TikTok. And I was thoroughly disgusted with myself. And then I was reading this book, and actually this is the book I'm going to recommend, Bored and Brilliant. And one of the alarming statistics in this book is if you are spending 25 minutes per day on social media, they specifically named Facebook in the book, that is at the end of the average adult life, that is 2 years of your life to Facebook. And I read that and I was like, how dare Facebook? I am giving them 2 years of my life? Like, absolutely not. Now, in general, I'm now giving 2 years of my life to social media as a whole, but I put locks on all of my social media apps. So after 10 minutes on TikTok, then it cuts off. I think it's 5 minutes on Facebook, and then it cuts off. And I think I allowed myself 20 minutes on Instagram just because I do Instagram for the Norfolk Library, which follows on Instagram, by the way, if you don't. So I give myself a little more time because I actually do professional activities on Instagram. But this book, it really helped me look at my phone and look at my life and see how dependent I have become on technology. And I love some of the changes that I've made. Like I will now put my phone in my backpack when I'm walking home, so it's zipped up and I'm not tempted to look at it. So I enjoy my walk home a little bit more. And I actually feel more space in my head where I don't feel like the fog anymore of the languishing and the being drawn into technology. And then on this note, the Norfolk Library in August, we're going to start offering take a pause reading time at the library. It's going to be one morning per week for an hour before the library opens. So you can just come and relax anywhere you want in the library and just read. And it is going to be a technology-free zone. So you leave your phone at the front desk, you leave your iPad, whatever, at the front desk. We'll monitor them for you if you want, but you are just going to sit and take a pause and spend some time doing some deep reading. How to move forward, and we're wrapping up here, so we're almost done for people who are mindful of the time. So speaking of being mindful of the time, we will practice mindfulness. And I will credit mindfulness as when I was at a 17 in terms of the languishing flourishing scale. When I was at my rock bottom, it was my initiation into the world of mindfulness and starting to meditate that really changed my life significantly. And so if you ask me personally, out of all of these, what's the one thing I would recommend getting started on right now? I would say meditation/mindfulness. I highly recommend this great course, The Science of Mindfulness. I see a few people on this presentation actually attended the Science of Mindfulness class, so maybe if we have time, you want to speak about it. It's a digital course. It's available through Canopy and Hoopla. The Norfolk Library has Canopy. I know we have some Scoville Memorial Library patrons on this presentation. Scoville also has Canopy. And it's 24 lectures. Each are 30 minutes. It's Dr. Siegel is an excellent presenter. There's a PDF book that goes along with it for you to follow along. I highly recommend it. And because the Norfolk Library is serious about our commitment to helping us flourish, in July, we're going to start a 4-week mindfulness course. And once I have the details for that, I will send it out to everyone. All right, last but not least, how to move forward is we're going to focus on a small goal. Because here's what happens when you focus small and then you achieve something, that's going to fire off the neurotransmitters in your brain like nothing else. And it's going to give you momentum and motivation to keep focusing on small goals and keep achieving. And oh my gosh, do our brains love that? And all of a sudden we go from languishing and then we're flourishing again. And for that, I'm going to recommend Atomic Habits. And on that note, well, one of the things I really like about Atomic Habits is that James Clear talked about this in a way that I hadn't really heard before. And he had this really great diagram. And because I'm speaking in the moment, I'm like, where did I put this? Because I want to get it right. And it was when you are talking about changing yourself. A lot of times when we talk about our goals, like when I created that exercise goal, I was really focused on just the outcome, is I wanted to exercise more. But in the early part of this book, James Clear makes the point that, well, if you want to develop an actual, like the good habit that's going to last through your whole life, you actually have to focus more on your identity of who you are. And he gives us this great example over on is if you are trying to quit smoking and someone offers you a cigarette, there's a very big difference between saying, I can't, I'm quitting, versus saying, no, I don't smoke. Because the first one is admitting to yourself that you're still a smoker. So you haven't changed your identity yet. In the latter, you're being like, yeah, I'm not a smoker anymore, so no thank you for that cigarette. And so this book came recommended to me. So through the Scoville Library, I've been leading a productivity club. It started during the pandemic in March of 2020. And we've been meeting every other Saturday, so now going on 15 months. And somebody's daughter recommended this book, and then somebody in the group read it, and then somebody else in the group read it, and then a third person read it. And so we decided, like, we're just going to all read this book together. And so when I decided we were going to do that as a group, I brought it to the Norfolk Library and I said, well, hey, could we offer this to all of our patrons here? Because maybe this is something that people would like to participate in. It's just for this summer, and it's going to be a 12-week period where we're going to read this book together. So you don't have to read the whole book before we meet, but on the first class, we're just going to talk a little bit about why we're here, like what we hope to get out of the 12-week program. And then I'll be giving out a syllabus on that, or it's going to be virtual. I'll be giving out a syllabus. And then we're going to read the book together. I mean, well, alone together. You know what I mean. And then we'll come together and we'll talk about it, and we'll come up with specific ways we can make it relevant to the small goal that we want to achieve. And so this is to jumpstart us together to go from languishing to flourishing, because having accountability, knowing people are in the same situation as you, just having a buddy along the way, having people to talk to about something that you're trying to change in your life, those can be really valuable. And so I went on a little longer than I anticipated, because you can tell I get really excited about this. So I apologize. I don't want to shortchange anyone on questions. If people have questions, you're welcome to email me at the library. I'm happy. I'm going to stop sharing, actually. I am happy to take your questions now. If you have to leave at 6:30, that's totally fine. Like I said, it's recording. Oh, and I have a delightful message here from Leslie, who also works at the library, that the Happy Traveler book is available on Hoopla, which is one of our e-media streaming services. So you just need your Norfolk Library card. If you don't know that, just contact me and I can let you know about that. So thank you for listening to me. I know that was a lot to digest in an hour, but I'm hoping at least one or two of those techniques triggered something in you and you thought, okay, well, yeah, maybe I'm going to try that. And I wish you the best of luck. And I, again, just want to remind you to approach it with a spirit of experimentation. See what happens. You know, you're welcome to come into the library and chat with me about it. I do want to say that I'm not a clinical psychologist. I am a research psychologist. That's why I'm so well read on the topic of well-being. And it's just something I'm passionate about. I find this research so interesting, and the way simple acts can change our emotions, which then change our thoughts, which can have overarching impacts, I should say, across our lives. All right, well, are there any questions? Feel free to unmute or type your question in the chat. And if you would like to sign up for Atomic Habits, the link is on the library's website.
Thank you, Kelly, for a wonderful, wonderful program. Lots of stuff to read.
Well, the library is an excellent resource. It's not just about books. We are an all-encompassing library. Creativity, mental health, education, spirituality, we got it all here at the Norfolk Library.
We do.
Kelly, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say thank you. And I love the idea of tying in the thinking with the books so that we could take deeper dives into whichever aspect grabbed us.
Yeah, I'm really glad that resonated with you. I can't tell who was saying that, but just thank you.
Oh, sorry. It was Betsy Garside. I can't.
Oh, Betsy, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I can't turn my video on. We're having power troubles. So.
Oh, yeah, no problem. It looks like we might get a store in here too.
I think, Betsy, you're in New Mexico, right?
I am.
Yeah. So.
Wow. Well, thanks for tuning in from New Mexico. This is a first for me.
Yeah. No, it was great. And I've got to scoot, but thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, does anyone have any comments? Otherwise, we're going to sign off here. And I know sometimes it can take a while to think of your question, so please feel free to reach out to me at the library. And if for some reason you're like, none of these worked for me, like I don't think it's going to work, I have a list like a mile long of other books I've read. So you just come to the library and we will chat, you know, like once or twice, and I can make a recommendation once I get to know you a little bit better, because there are all kinds of books out there, even for the people who don't like the mindfulness stuff. There's something for everyone. All right, well, have a good night, everyone. Thank you, and I will see you around the library.
Great. Bye, everybody.
Bye.